The moment Instructor Vex'thor raised his clawed hand and struck Cadet Maya Chen across the face, every single being in Training Bay 7 went silent. Not the kind of silence that happens when someone drops a glass. No, this was a silence of held breath, of muscles tensing, of predators recognizing they just watched something irreversible happen. Maya's head snapped to the side from the force of the blow. Blood trickled from her split lip, painting a thin red line down her chin. For 3 long seconds, she stood perfectly still. Then, slowly, deliberately, she turned her head back to face the towering Krellian instructor. And she smiled. "Oh," she said softly, wiping the blood with the back of her hand. "You really should not have done that." Vex'thor was a decorated combat veteran of the Krellian Empire, a species that had conquered 4 to 7 star systems before humanity had even invented the wheel. He stood 9 feet tall, covered in scales harder than titanium, with 4 arms ending in talons that could shred durasteel. He had survived wars that wiped out entire civilizations. He looked down at this small human female, this fragile creature of soft flesh and breakable bones, and he laughed. "What will you do, little primate?" Vex'thor hissed, his translator rendering his native clicks and growls into perfect galactic common. "File a complaint. Cry to your supervisors. Your species has been in the Galactic Union for barely 10 cycles. You are guests here. Students. You will learn respect, or you will learn pain. Choose quickly." Maya's smile widened. She touched her tongue to her split lip, tasting her own blood. "Actually," she said, her voice carrying across the training bay with eerie calm, "I was thinking something more immediate." The other cadets, a mix of species from across the Union, backed away. The Zentari twins, Kree and Krom, who had been Maya's combat partners for 6 months, exchanged worried glances. They knew something the instructor did not. Humans were new to the galactic stage. Very new. Most species had studied them for less than a decade. There were files, of course, medical reports, biological assessments. The general consensus was that humans were surprisingly durable for a death world species, adaptable, creative, but ultimately nothing special in terms of pure combatability. What the files did not mention, what the xenobiologists had not yet quantified, was what happened when you pushed a human past their breaking point. Vex'thor had made 2 critical mistakes that day. The first was assuming Maya Chen was just another soft recruit who would accept abuse because she was too afraid to fight back. The second was not reading her service record before striking her. Maya had not always been a Union cadet. Before joining the integration program, she had been a combat medic in the Human Territorial Defense Force. She had served in 3 separate conflict zones on Earth. She had patched up wounded soldiers while under direct fire. She had carried men twice her size out of burning buildings. She had once performed emergency surgery on herself after taking shrapnel to the abdomen because the rest of her unit was too injured to help. And 6 months before arriving at this training facility, she had watched her entire squad die in an ambush during a peacekeeping mission on Europa Station. She had not joined the Union program to make friends. She had joined because she had nothing left to lose, and a very specific need to find new ways to hurt things. "You dare threaten me?" Vex'thor roared, all 4 arms spreading wide in an intimidation display that had sent countless beings fleeing in terror. "I have killed warriors who made you look like an insect. I have bathed in the blood of enemies who—" He never finished the sentence. Maya moved, not the clumsy, telegraph movement of an amateur. This was a fluid, economical motion of someone who had trained for thousands of hours, who had fought for survival so many times that violence had become a second language. She closed the distance between them in half a heartbeat, ducking under his massive reach. Her right hand shot forward, fingers rigid, and struck him directly in the throat, right at the soft spot just above his chest plates where the translator device was embedded. Vex'thor gagged, stumbling backward. His 4 arms flailed, trying to grab her, but Maya was already moving. She pivoted, dropped low, and delivered a devastating kick to the side of his left knee. The joint bent sideways with a wet crack that echoed through the training bay. Vex'thor howled, dropping to one knee, his face twisted in rage and pain. "You broken little." Maya stepped in close, inside his guard where his massive arms could not effectively reach her. "Fun fact about human anatomy," she said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "We are really, really good at breaking things. Millions of years of evolution taught us how to turn rocks into tools, tools into weapons, and weapons into art forms. We got very creative about killing. Her knee came up and struck him directly in what passed for a Krellian solar plexus. The air exploded from his lungs in a wheezing gasp. We also, Maya continued, grabbing one of his arms and twisting it at an angle that made several watching cadets wince, have this wonderful thing called endurance hunting. We do not give up. We do not stop. We chase our prey until it dies from exhaustion. We are the boogeyman of our own planet's ecosystem, and we climb to the top of the food chain by being too stubborn to quit. She released his arm and stepped back, watching him struggle to rise. Blood was running from his mouth now, dark purple against his green scales. His breathing was ragged. "Get up," Maya said quietly. "Come on, Instructor. Show me that legendary Krellian warrior spirit. You wanted to teach me a lesson about respect, right? So teach me. I am waiting." Vex'thor lunged at her with a roar of pure fury. It was a clumsy attack, driven by pain and rage rather than skill. Maya sidestepped easily, grabbed one of his arms, and used his own momentum to send him crashing face first into floor. The training bay's reinforced surface cracked under the impact. She was on his back in an instant, one hand gripping the crest of scales that ran down his spine, the other positioned at the base of his skull. "Here's another fun human fact," she whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. "We have this concept called proportional response. Someone pushes us, we push back harder. Someone hits us, we hit back harder. Someone threatens our lives." Her hand tightened on his skull. "Well, you can probably guess where this is going." Vex'thor tried to throw her off, but his injured knee would not support his weight. He collapsed back to the floor, gasping. "You cannot. Kill me," he managed to wheeze. "Union law forbids." "Oh, I am not going to kill you," Maya said. Her voice had gone flat, emotionless. "That would be too quick, too merciful. No, I am going to do something much worse." She stood up, releasing him, and stepped back. "Get up, now." Vex'thor struggled to his feet, using 3 of his arms to push himself upright. He was favoring his damaged knee heavily. Blood dripped from multiple wounds. His eyes, huge and golden, were wide with something he had not felt in decades. "Fear." Maya walked in a slow circle around him, her movements deliberate, controlled. "You know what the funny thing is?" she asked. "I actually came here wanting to learn. I thought, maybe, just maybe, I could put the past behind me. Start fresh. Be part of something bigger than human conflicts and human pain. I genuinely wanted to believe in this grand Galactic Union vision of cooperation and mutual respect." She stopped directly in front of him, hands at her sides, completely relaxed. "Then you went and reminded me why I am better at breaking things than building them." Vex'thor swung at her again, desperation overriding his training. Maya ducked under the blow, stepped in close, and delivered a short, brutal punch directly to his lower jaw. There was a sound like a tree branch snapping. Vex'thor staggered backward, his jaw hanging at an unnatural angle. He made a horrible gurgling sound, trying to speak but unable to form words. One of his hands went to his face, touching the ruined joint where his lower jaw connected to his skull. Maya held up her right hand. Between her blooded fingers, she was holding something that looked like a piece of curved bone, covered in purple blood and fragments of scale. His jawbone, or rather, the piece she had just torn free from its socket. The training bay exploded into chaos. Cadets were screaming, shouting, running for the exits. Someone was calling for medical assistance. Someone else was calling for security. Through it all, Maya stood perfectly still, staring at the piece of alien anatomy in her hand like she was trying to figure out how it had gotten there. Kree, one of the Zentari twins, approached her carefully. "Maya," he said softly. "Maya, you need to drop that. Right now. Security is coming." Maya looked up at him, her brown eyes distant, unfocused. "He hit me first," she said quietly. I was defending myself. That is allowed, right? Self-defense." "Yes," Kree said. "Yes, it is allowed. But you need to drop the—" He gestured at the jawbone. "The evidence. Please." Maya looked down at her hand again. Then, very deliberately, She walked over to where Vex'thor was kneeling on the floor, trying to hold his shattered face together with 3 of his hands while the 4th fumbled for his emergency beacon. She dropped a piece of jawbone on the floor in front of him. "Keep it," she said. "Consider it a souvenir. Something to remember me by when you tell people about the day you learned humans do not make good punching bags." The security team arrived 37 seconds later, which was actually impressively fast considering they had to traverse 3 decks to reach Training Bay 7. They found Maya sitting cross-legged on the floor, her hands resting on her knees, looking like she was meditating. Around her was chaos. Injured instructor, panicked cadets, blood everywhere. The lead security officer, a massive drachna named Saul, approached her cautiously. "Cadet Chen," he rumbled, "you need to come with us. Now." Maya opened her eyes and looked up at him. "Am I under arrest?" "That depends," Saul said carefully. "Are you going to resist?" Maya stood up slowly, raising her hand to show they were empty. "No, I will come peacefully. I assume there will be an inquiry." "Oh yes," Saul said. "A very thorough inquiry." Maya nodded. "Good. I want it on record. Every single detail. Starting with the fact that your decorated instructor struck a cadet without provocation in front of multiple witnesses during a training exercise that had nothing to do with combat protocols." Saul's eyes narrowed. "Is that what happened?" "Yes," came a voice from the crowd. Crom, the other Zentari twin, stepped forward. "It is exactly what happened. Instructor Vex'thor lost his temper because Cadet Chen questioned his teaching methods. He struck her. She responded in self-defense." Other voices chimed in, agreeing. Even cadets from species that generally dislike humans corroborated the story. Whatever else they thought about the violence they had just witnessed, they had all seen who threw the first blow. Saul looked from Maya to the broken instructor being tended to by medical personnel, then back to Maya. "I see," he said slowly. "Well, this is going to be a very interesting report to file." Maya allowed herself to be led away, her hands secured in restraint fields more out of procedure than necessity. As they exited the training bay, she looked back one last time at Vex'thor. Their eyes met. She smiled. He looked away first. The holding cell was surprisingly comfortable, which Maya found almost insulting. Soft lighting, climate-controlled atmosphere, a sleeping platform that actually looked clean. They had even provided her with a medical kit to treat her split lip, though she had not bothered using it yet. The pain helped her focus. She had been sitting in silence for approximately 3 hours when the door finally opened. Commander Thalen walked in, and Maya immediately understood this was not going to be a simple disciplinary hearing. Thalen was head of the entire Galactic Union Training Program, a position that put her in charge of preparing cadets from 200 different species for integration into Union Defense Forces. She was also, according to rumor, one of the most decorated intelligence officers in Union history. She was Valerian, a species known for their telepathic abilities and their absolute commitment to justice. Her skin was a deep silver, her eyes completely black, and she moved with a kind of grace that suggested she could probably kill you in a dozen different ways before you realized she had moved. "Cadet Chen," Thalen said, her voice carrying harmonics that Maya's translator struggled to render properly. "You have created quite the situation." Maya stood at attention. "Yes, Commander." "Sit down," Thalen said, gesturing to the sleeping platform. She pulled up a chair and sat across from Maya, studying her with those unsettling black eyes. "I have spent the last 3 hours reviewing footage from Training Bay 7, reading testimony from 43 different witnesses, and speaking with medical personnel about Instructor Vex'thor's injuries. Would you like to know what I found?" "I assume you found that he struck me first, Commander." "I did." Thalen's expression did not change. "I also found that you responded with a level of violence that exceeded anything in your training profile. You are listed as a medical specialist with basic combat qualifications. Nothing in your file suggested you were capable of neutralizing a Krellian combat instructor in under 40 seconds. Maya said nothing. Thalen leaned forward slightly. "So I dug deeper. I accessed your full service record from Earth. Not just a sanitized version you submitted for union review, but the classified files, the ones that detail exactly what you did during the Europa Station incident." Maya's jaw tightened. That information is supposed to be sealed. Nothing is sealed to me, Thalen said quietly. I read about the ambush, about how you spent 6 hours trapped in a damaged section of the station with 3 dying squad members and no way to call for help, about how you performed field surgery with a broken arm and 3 cracked ribs, about how, when the hostiles finally breached your position, you killed 4 of them with your bare hands and a medical scalpel because you had run out of ammunition. The commander paused, letting that sink in. I also read the psychiatric evaluation that followed, the one that recommended you for immediate discharge due to severe post-traumatic stress and violent ideation, the one that got quietly buried because someone high up decided you were too valuable to lose. Maya met her gaze. Are you going to discharge me now? That depends, Thalen said. Are you going to tell me the truth about what happened today? I already told security. I do not care what you told security, Thalen interrupted. I want to know why. You could have reported Vex'thor. You could have simply taken a hit and filed a formal complaint. Instead, you chose to brutalize him in front of his students. Why? Maya was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because I am tired of being hit. Explain. Do you know what it is like, Maya said slowly, to spend your entire life being told you are not good enough, not strong enough, not tough enough? I grew up on Earth during the integration era. Do you have any idea what that was like for humans? Suddenly discovering we were not alone in the universe, that we were actually one of the weakest species, that everything we thought made us special was just ordinary, unremarkable. She stood up, pacing the small cell. I joined the military to prove something. To myself, to my family, to everyone who said humans would never measure up to galactic standards. I trained harder than anyone. I pushed myself further than anyone. And you know what I learned? It did not matter. Because every single time I succeeded, someone found a way to diminish it, to explain it away, to make it clear that I was still just a human, still just a fragile little death welder playing at being a soldier. Thalen listened without interrupting. Then Europa happened, Maya continued. And I watched people I loved die because our equipment was second-rate, our backup was delayed, and our intel was garbage. All because humans were still considered probationary members of the Union. Not quite trusted, not quite equal. We got the worst assignments, the oldest gear, the least support. And when things went wrong, when we died, it was just acceptable losses. The cost of integration. Her hands clenched into fists. So when I came here, I told myself it would be different. This was the training program. Elite cadets from across the Union. Everyone on equal footing. But then Vex'thor started his little campaign of harassment. Little comments about human weakness. Extra exercises designed to push us past our limits. And today, when I dared to suggest that maybe his teaching methods were ineffective, he decided to remind me of my place. Maya turned to face Thalen directly. He hit me because he thought he could. Because he thought I was too weak, too scared, or too concerned about my career to fight back. He thought hitting me would break me, would put me in my place, would remind me that humans are still just visitors in this grand galactic civilization. And so you broke him instead, Thalen said. Yes. To prove a point. To survive, Maya corrected. Commander, I know what happens when you let bullies establish dominance. They do not stop, they escalate. If I had let that hit slide, if I had gone through official channels and filed complaints and waited for justice, what do you think would have happened? At best, he gets a reprimand. At worst, I get labeled as a troublemaker and quietly reassigned. Meanwhile, he keeps teaching, keeps abusing cadets, keeps perpetuating this idea that might makes right. So you took justice into your own hands. Maya smiled, but there was no humor in it. I took my face into my own hands, along with his jaw. Seemed fair. Thalen stood up and walked to the door. For a moment, Maya thought the interview was over, that the commander was leaving to process her discharge papers. But instead, Thalen turned back, her black eyes reflecting the cell's soft lighting. 26 years ago, Thalen said, I was a junior intelligence officer assigned to infiltrate a Krellian military installation. My cover was blown within the first week. I was captured, interrogated, and tortured for information I did not have. The officer in charge of my interrogation was convinced that all Valorians were telepathic spies, that we could not be trusted, that we were a threat to Krellian security. She paused. His name was Commander Vex'thor, Vex'thor's father. Maya's eyes widened slightly. I survived that interrogation, Thalen continued. Barely. And when I was finally rescued, I had a choice. I could file charges, seek justice through official channels, or I could let it go, move on, focus on my career. Do you know what I did? You filed charges, Maya guessed. No, Thalen said. I did nothing, because I was told that pursuing charges would create diplomatic incidents, would jeopardize the fragile peace between our species, would mark me as someone who put personal grievances above the greater good. So I stayed quiet, and Vex'thor continued his career, continued abusing prisoners, continued teaching his son that some species were superior to others. She moved closer to Maya. I have spent 26 years regretting that decision, wondering how many others suffered because I chose silence over justice. Watching Vex'thor's son follow in his father's footsteps, perpetuating the same hatred, the same cruelty, the same toxic belief that physical power grants the right to abuse those weaker than yourself. Thalen's expression softened slightly. So when I saw the footage of you holding Vex'thor's jawbone, my first thought was not how to punish you. My first thought was that someone finally did what I should have done decades ago. Maya blinked. Commander, are you saying? I am saying that you will not be discharged, Thalen said. You will not be punished. In fact, you will be receiving a commendation for defending yourself against an unprovoked assault by a superior officer. Furthermore, Instructor Vex'thor will be formally charged with assault on a cadet, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming of a Union officer. His teaching credentials will be revoked, and he will face a tribunal. Maya struggled to find words. I do not understand. I nearly killed him. You defended yourself, Thalen corrected, within the boundaries of proportional response as defined by Union combat regulations. He struck you. You neutralized the threat. The fact that you were significantly more efficient at neutralizing threats than anyone expected is not a crime. It is simply evidence that our assessment of human combat capabilities needs updating. The commander pulled out a datapad and handed it to Maya. This is your new assignment. Effective immediately, you are being transferred to advanced combat instruction. Your new role will be teaching defensive tactics to cadets from low combat species. You will also be consulting on updates to our combat training protocols, with specific focus on asymmetric warfare and dealing with opponents who possess significant physical advantages. Maya stared at the datapad. You want me to teach other cadets how to fight opponents stronger than themselves. I want you to teach them how to survive, Thalen said. How to turn weakness into advantage. How to use intelligence, creativity, and sheer stubborn determination to overcome superior force. These are skills humans have refined over millennia of intraspecies conflict, skills that many other species desperately need to learn. She moved toward the door again, then paused. Oh, and Cadet Chen, one more thing. That smile you gave Vex'thor as you left the training bay, the one that made a 9-foot Krellian warrior look away first, that was perhaps the most effective psychological warfare I have witnessed in my entire career. Consider adding that to your curriculum. The door opened, and Thalen stepped through. But before it closed, she looked back one final time. Welcome to the Union, Cadet Chen, the Real Union, the one where strength is not measured by how hard you can hit, but by how hard you can be hit and keep standing. Something tells me humans are going to fit in just fine. The door closed, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. She looked down at the datapad, scrolling through her new assignment details. Advanced combat instruction, teaching position, curriculum development, consulting role on asymmetric warfare tactics. It was more responsibility than she had ever expected, more opportunity than she had thought possible. Her hand went to her split lip, touching the dried blood. It still hurt. Good. Pain was useful. Pain was honest. Pain reminded you that you were still alive, still fighting, still refusing to break. She thought about Vex'thor, about the look in his eyes when he realized he had made a terrible mistake. She thought about all the other cadets who had been watching, who had seen a human defend herself successfully against overwhelming force. She thought about what message that sent, what precedent it established. Humans were not pushovers. Humans were not victims. Humans were survivors. 3 weeks later, Maya stood in front of her first class. 37 cadets from 19 different species, all of them categorized as low combat or non-combat personnel. Medical specialists, engineers, communications officers, the ones who were usually expected to run when fighting started, to let the warriors handle the danger. "Good morning," Maya said, her voice carrying across the training bay. "My name is Instructor Chen. Over the next 16 weeks, I am going to teach you something very important. I am going to teach you that being weaker than your opponent does not mean being helpless. I am going to teach you that size and strength matter less than speed and precision. I am going to teach you that the most dangerous fighter in any conflict is not the one with the biggest weapons, but the one with nothing left to lose." She smiled, and several cadets shifted uncomfortably. That smile had become somewhat famous in the weeks since the incident with Vex'thor. Recordings of the fight had leaked, despite official attempts at containment. Throughout the Union training facilities, cadets whispered about the human who broke a Krellian in 40 seconds, who had literally disarticulated his jaw and walked away like it meant nothing. "Some of you are wondering if the stories are true," Maya continued. "Did I really do what everyone says I did? Did I really hold his jawbone? Did I really smile afterward?" She held up her right hand, flexing her fingers. Yes, I did. And you know what the best part was? It was not the victory. It was not the revenge. It was a moment when he looked at me, really looked at me, and realized that he had underestimated me. That was the moment his worldview shattered. That was a moment he understood that physical power means nothing if you do not know how to use it effectively. Maya began pacing along the front of the room. "That is what I am going to teach you. Not just how to fight, not just how to defend yourselves, but how to break the confidence of opponents who think they have already won. How to turn their certainty into doubt. How to make them afraid of you, not because of what you are, but because of what you refuse to be." She stopped and faced the class directly. "You refuse to be victims. You refuse to be helpless. You refuse to break. And that, more than any weapon or any technique, is what will keep you alive." One of the cadets, a small Pishian named Krellian, raised her hand tentatively. "Instructor Chen, what if we are not naturally aggressive? What if we do not want to hurt anyone?" Maya's expression softened. "Then you will be excellent at de-escalation and conflict avoidance, which are the most important combat skills anyone can learn. But if those fail, if someone forces violence upon you, then you need to know how to end that violence as quickly and efficiently as possible. Not because you want to hurt them, but because you want to survive. There is no shame in self-preservation." She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many cadets as possible. "Here is what I promise you. By the end of this course, each of you will have the skills necessary to defend yourself against opponents twice your size. You will understand leverage, pressure points, momentum, and psychology. You will know how to turn an attacker's strength against them. And most importantly, you will have the confidence to stand your ground when threatened, because you will know that being small, weak, or non-competent does not mean being defenseless." "Now," Maya said, clapping her hands together, "let us begin. Partner up. I want to see your baseline capabilities before we start making improvements." As the cadets moved to follow her instructions, Maya caught sight of Commander Thalen observing from a viewing gallery above. The Valian gave her a small nod of approval. Maya nodded back. Then she turned her attention to her students, to this group of supposedly weak and vulnerable beings who deserved to know they were neither. Somewhere in a medical facility 3 levels down, Vex'thor was being fitted with prosthetic jaw assembly. The procedure would take months. The physical therapy would take even longer. But the psychological damage, the knowledge that he had been beaten so thoroughly by someone he considered inferior, that would last forever. And honestly, Maya was fine with that. She had not come to the Galactic Union to make friends or win popularity contests. She had come to survive, to prove that humans belonged, and to ensure that no one ever felt as helpless as she had felt watching her squad die on Europa Station. Mission accomplished. The galaxy was slowly learning what humanity had known for millennia. There are no weak species. No inferior beings. No acceptable victims. There are only those who refuse to give up, who refuse to break, who refuse to let anyone else define their worth or their strength. And humans? Humans were very, very good at refusing.